Welcome to The Link Online. And yes, we're coming to you live on Facebook here on Fridays at 16:15 hours GMT, or about 1:15 in the afternoon if you happen to be in the eastern part of North America. Hello, Mark Montgomery with you once again, along with Terry Haig. Hello, Terry.
Hi, Mark.
I've misspelled it. It's Terry
Hair, yeah, I know. I think they do that on my Medicare card, too. I don't know why.
And, of course, on keyboards and social media, Shen. Hey! Big wave there. And on the other side of the room, in the controls out there, our sound technician today, Tanya Gancheva, big smile. And deep in the far back dark reaches of the control room, and our overseeing angel, Pierre Dutil.
My cousin Dutil.
He's in charge of shipping and receiving,
In-law.
Technical and logistical problems, and psychological counseling for RCI staff.
That's for me, mainly.
As Pierre will say, it's for all of us. All right. Coming up in this half hour, how Google continues to track your movements even if you turn off the tracking function on your smartphone.
Yeah, duh.
Well, do you know that? Did you?
I read the article this week, too.
Okay, all right. Also, a new
but
book.
I knew that anyway.
Did you?
Yeah.
Well, then you're smarter than me. I mean,
You didn't know that?
Even my smartphone.
They can follow. They can figure out where you were 5 years ago, man. If we met on the corner of St. Lawrence and I don't know.
Well, you have a special insight into that, and so does Shen, who's our guy of technology. Anyway, there's also coming up a story about a book on the life of pirates and the age of sail, and the most famous of them all, Black Bart. That's coming up. Terry, what do you have for us this week?
Oh, well, one of the world's oldest activities, come sports, may be going to the Olympics. Sport?
Not that old activity.
Well, this is the third oldest sport.
All right, the third oldest activity. All right, we'll have those stories coming up for you on this edition of The Link Online. All right, here's something, again, we're just talking about, the instance of how giant internet companies are finding out all about us when we use our smartphones. And there was an Associated Press investigation, the one you probably read, Terry, that discovered that even if you turn off the tracking function on your phone, Google still knows exactly where you are and where you have been. Now, according to Graham Hurst, they can still track you through the various other apps and any searches that you do. And Professor Hurst teaches in the Department of Computer Science at the University of Toronto.
What you're turning off with location activity is literal tracking of your movements. So if that's turned on, then, well, because your phone's a GPS receiver and always knows where it is, every so often, quite frequently, your phone would send out a note to Google saying, this is where I am right now. And that means that if you're on the move, driving along a road or just walking somewhere, Google gets your movements, the path you're following, and, of course, the speed at which you're going, from which it can compute driving distances along roads. If you're staying in a single place, well, it learns that too. And if you turn that off, well, you're turning off tracking of movements, but what you're not turning off is all use of your location. And an example of that is Google search. If you look for something like restaurants near me, well, it has to know where you are to be able to answer that request. Even if you don't include words like near me, if you just, for example, search for restaurants or some kind of business or something, it will prioritize businesses near you. So, yeah, in these situations, Google still uses your location. The same is true if you open Google Maps. It gives you a map of your present location.
What you're saying, it doesn't sound necessarily nefarious on the part of Google, but again, it's a bit more information about people's private lives. And if this information is tacked onto other information, which is tacked onto other information about what you're doing, where you're going, and your online activities and searches and so forth, is this combined into a much bigger privacy problem?
It certainly is, and we saw that last year with the Cambridge Analytica scandal. In the case of Facebook then, not Google, but similar, you can get an extraordinary amount of information about people from their Facebook postings, from their searches, from everything that they do online. And in the Cambridge Analytica case, they used that to build extraordinarily detailed profiles, decide exactly what kind of, let's call them political interventions, were suitable for those people to meet the ends of their political customers. And in doing so, they ended up, perhaps it's not too strong to say, perverting, not merely perturbing the political process.
Can we stop this process of finding out all about us?
Well, you can always go as private as you like with Google once you know how to do it. So if you don't want Google using your location at all, you turn off not just location activity, but web and apps activity. And the price that you pay for that is that all of a sudden Google searches won't be so good. You won't be able to do locality searches for businesses and so on, at least not without specifying where you are. And when you do that, you've started giving things away anyway. So even with location turned off, Google can learn a lot about you just from the things that you're doing. And you can see that in myactivity.google.com. You can look at it and make an awful lot of inferences about what a person is doing. Now, you can completely opt out if you want to, but that's almost like opting out of modern life.
All right, and that was an excerpt of my conversation with Gray, a professor in the Department of Computer Science at the University of Toronto, and the full interview is in our highlights section. Terry, you were saying before we started the program that there's the legal implications of this. If you're a bad guy, you're kind of cooked, because what's the situation?
Well, my nephew is a former prosecutor in Minneapolis. Now he's moved to Seattle. He's obviously a lawyer. He told me that when you know all the young prosecutors, they brought an FBI guy in to tell them about phones. If you got the information, if you got the guy's phone, you got the guy. The only way you can't get, you could throw it in the lake, you can throw it here, you can throw it in the river, the ocean. They can, if you get it back, it won't. It'll give all the stuff you want. The only thing you can do is grind it to dust. And then you might have a shot where it wouldn't hurt you. That's what my
there was a story that I did a couple of months ago that they found out that by tracking people's cell phones in the courtroom, because you're not supposed to know the names of the jurors, right?
Okay.
But they can find out the names of the jurors by tracking their cell phones. And then theoretically and possibly you could influence them by, if you find out what your name is, you find out where you live, you might be able to, potentially, I suppose, either intimidate the witness or pay them off, you know. So that was a bit of a scary thing that the legal system found out about cell phones. So
the whole thing is scary.
Oh, are you scared? You're an expert in this thing, you know.
No, I don't think
like
so.
the way he's so...
My heart's very zen.
You know,
he's
because
very
that's
zen
just
about
kind of
things,
the balance of life, you know. If you want to take advantage of the modern, like mobile kind of the, usage of all kind of information, maybe you have to sacrifice something. Yeah. That's something, I've seen.
But that's a big sacrifice.
I know, and that's why there's need a regulation, need a law, need a government to come in to regulate this kind of the usage of the privacy.
Yeah, but the government is you got to watch out for.
Is your phone tracking off? Do they know where you are at this instant?
I think so.
Who, the government does? They know where we all are, right?
Everybody knows.
We're working for the government.
All right, coming up in just a moment, we're going to take a look at piracy. Arr. All right, here's an interesting question. You know why when we think of pirates, we think of "arr"?
Yeah.
Do you know where that comes from?
The movie.
Treasure Island.
Treasure Island, yeah.
And the actor Robert Newton.
Well done.
Yeah.
Well done, Montgomery.
And the interesting thing was that he had this sort of Yorkshire accent from the west of England, which is, in fact, where a lot of pirates came from.
Oh,
so
really? Okay.
It may not have been all that wrong. Now, here's another question for you. Testing your pirate knowledge. If I said, describe the Jolly Roger, how would you describe it?
I would call it black with a skull and bones, right?
And you'd
a skull.
And you'd
bones.
be wrong.
What do you mean I'd be wrong?
Because the Jolly Roger, the name Jolly Roger is an Anglicism from Jolly Rouge, which was a red flag. If the pirates flew a red flag, the Jolly Roger, then you were in really deep trouble because they were angry. They were very angry, and they would just destroy you.
Well, we mean they're pretty angry all the time anyway.
Well,
right?
no, that's another myth. There's a whole bunch of myths. For example, did you know that the east coast of Canada was a popular piracy hunting ground?
Yeah, I knew that.
Okay, that's going for you. What about the fact that two of the most murderous pirates in history were based in Canada?
I knew that too.
Well, you're two.
I did a movie with Donald Sutherland called Pirates Passage. So
Oh, well, you're ahead of the game. I have to turn to her.
I have no
deliver
idea.
those lines.
I have no idea.
How about this one? The idea that pirates were all the time destroying ships and wreaking havoc.
That I didn't know.
Well, that's it. They didn't really want to fight
I
at
knew
all.
just the way you phrased that question, I knew how to. See, that's why I did so well on the SATs. Okay.
You've read me. All right. Well, anyway, this new book has just come out, and it's written about one of the most successful of the pirates, Black Bart, or Bartholomew Roberts. And he was one of those pirates who got his start in the big leagues of piracy on the Canadian East Coast. But besides being about his story, this book tells all kinds of information about pirate life, which was incredibly harsh. But also, which was surprising, pirates had the first sense in that era of egalitarian society. Imagine this. They had a vote. They could vote for captains and so on.
Okay, that's good.
Which, you didn't think about. Anyway.
But you better vote right.
Well, and the thing is about Black Bart is he was the first person to establish the idea of workman's compensation. If you were a member of his crew and you got crippled, he paid you. He said, okay, you can't work anymore. Here's some pay.
Okay, well, actually, I was reading a book, the Neanderthals, who get a bad press, right? Because because they were really smart, and they took care of their injured, and because they've now, people that go.
Something happened in the interval then because we lost track of that.
Well, no, because they got beaten by the Homo sapiens, the guys coming up. I'm reading this book called Sapiens. It's really interesting.
All right, let's get back to Black Bart then.
Well, no, but I mean, Black Bart was not the first guy to offer workers compensation.
Well, in that era, he certainly was.
I quibble with that statement, Montgomery.
Well, you can quibble.
Okay.
We'll speak later.
All right.
Anyway, the new book by Victor Southron is called Black Flag of the North, Bartholomew Roberts, King of the Atlantic Pirates. And one of the things I found out was that it was actually fairly easy for the pirates to get new recruits from the ships that they took over. And I asked him why that was.
Because it was a vastly unfair system, in the 18th century. The great revolutions in America and France hadn't come along yet, really, and the ordinary merchant sailor, out of whom most pirates came, was really a disposable source of labor to operate ships in pursuit of profit and commerce. And he knew that he was expendable. And so in many respects, knowing that there was nowhere to go, there was no upward mobility. When pirates came along and said, hey, come on along with us because it may not last for many years, but you can have access to all the drink you want, all the ladies you want, if you can convince them to be friendly to you, all the booty you want in a life of free adventure. It was unmistakably attractive.
The other interesting thing that you reveal in this book, Mr. Southron, is that it was the first kind of sense of an egalitarian society. Captains were elected on these pirate ships.
That's right, Mark. It was, in fact, some historians have said that this was almost the beginning of a sense of egalitarian democracy. Maybe that's stretching things a bit, but it's true that when pirates escaped from the terrors of brutal naval discipline or equally brutal treatment on the part of merchant captains into pirate societies, they were determined never to be governed by that kind of mindless violence and unfairness. And so they created, for the most part, these very equal societies where each man had a vote, where captains were elected because of their bravery or capacity to lead in battle, but could be removed by vote at any time. They all had equal shares in what were the results of their captures. They even provided for payment for loss of limb or incapacity of one kind or another. They made, in an unfair world, a little fair island of escape for themselves.
Now, as long as we're exploding myths here, Mr. Southron, the other aspect that people may not understand a lot is that pirates, as much as possible, tried to avoid fights.
That's right. Because, of course, what they wanted to do was to capture a ship and all its goods and what was on board intact. The last thing they needed was to, come alongside, a heavily laden merchantman, batter it into pieces, and then try to paw through with the wreckage to find things. And of course, they didn't want to fight for personal reasons as well. If they were wounded or many of their members killed in the struggle, really that was not what they wanted. What they wanted was an easy capture, where they had access both to the ship and to all its goods, to the wealth of the passengers on board, and so on, without any shedding of blood. So in many respects, pirates would come alongside a vessel that they were going to take, using every means possible to awe and frighten the people in the ship that was their prey. There would even have bands of music tootling on the after deck. They'd hoist great bloody flags, and of course the dreaded black flags. But the whole idea was to take them without a fight, because the fight was the last thing they wanted.
And that was part of my conversation with historian and author Victor Southron and his new book, Black Flag of the North.
That's wild, eh? That's really cool.
Yeah. Well, another thing you don't think about, but a lot of times they would attack a ship just to get new clothes, because as he says in the book, it's not as if these guys could go to the shore, any shore, just go shopping for new clothes.
That's true, eh? Yeah.
So they would attack a ship, and then they'd take people's clothes because they get new clothes.
But don't they get to didn't they get to winter in the Caribbean?
Let's.
Yeah, we're ahead of their times.
You want to hear real pirate speak? Here we go. Listen to this. And Tanya has located.
Oh, cool.
Arr. 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 We'll have some of your letters. Arr.
Chimney boy.
Coming up after this. All right, now we take a look at some of the comments that you have posted to various stories on our website. And, of course, all these stories are open for public commenting, and comments will be posted after they have been looked at by a moderator to assure they adhere to regulations of common sense, as it were.
Well, we vote on it, like that novel they're writing on Twitter in Toronto, right?
Indeed.
There are two tweets come in, and everybody votes on which one gets it. There's two finalists, and then they add to it.
Twits or tweets?
Well,
there's a difference there.
No, I'm not going there.
All right. Anyway, we had serious stories, actually. We have a couple of comments about the Montreal City Councillor who is proposing that Montreal ask the federal government for a national ban on handguns and modern sport rifles, which are commonly misidentified as assault rifles. And thus follows a call by Toronto's current mayor, John Tory, who called for a Toronto city ban on handguns. And this comment came from someone named Cretius.
Okay, he writes, from Mayor Tory of Toronto, as quoted in the Toronto Star on August 4th, 2007, when he was leader of the Ontario Progressive Conservative Party. And here's the quote. Quote, when people say have a handgun ban, it's a case of mistaken priorities and a kind of solution that will superficially make people perhaps feel better, but won't really address the issue. That's the quote from Tory. And then we go back to Cretius. Federal Prime Minister Trudeau will do anything to court votes from the ignorant and fearful among us. I'm glad Tory's not saying that. I want to make that clear. For Trudeau and his ilk, appearing to address a problem is as good as actually offering solution that address the reality of violent urban gangs, approximately 80 in Toronto.
All right, that's a comment from Cretius on the...
Cretius fired up.
Well, he is indeed. Well, on that same story, Mr. Tremblay wrote this comment about Alex Norris, who is the Montreal City Councillor, and his gun ban proposal.
It's going to pass, by the way, because the Projet Montréal has the... and he's head of the Public Safety Commission, is Alex. And the Projet Montréal has a majority in the
Montreal
City Council.
Yeah.
It appears Mr. Norris knows better than our very own security experts, the RCMP. This is Mr. Tremblay speaking. It is they who clear each license holder and who continually screen them for public safety concerns. They are the experts, not Mr. Norris. Firearms are already banned, period. Full stop. It is illegal to have one, use one, or even touch one unless cleared by the RCMP. I suppose Mr. Norris wants to double ban them. I'm sure that gang members will line up to turn them in. Mr. Norris also stated he expects police to, quote, go door to door confiscating them, unquote. Since when is the government allowed to come into someone's home who has done no wrong and take their property? Mr. Norris deems from on high to be not necessary. That sounds ghost-written to me, Montgomery. Did you write that?
I guess not.
It's pretty much what you said, what you told me when I was preparing the interview.
Because I've been researching this story. I know some facts, but no, this is
ghostwriter.
Don't start that.
Mr. Tremblay. We don't even know his first name. I think you ghost wrote
Tremblay.
that. Okay.
I didn't include his first name.
Okay. It's known as Mr. Tremblay. They call me Mr. Tibbs.
That's going back too. All right, let's move on. Those are a couple of comments on that story about a Montreal city councillor who wants the city to ask the federal government to ban handguns and modern sport rifles, which he incorrectly calls assault rifles. And on another note, we had a story from April this year and a comment this week, and that story was that Canada was to provide $19.4 million in humanitarian aid to Syria and Lebanon. And Mohammed Khan wrote,
I salute the Canadian people for their help for Syrian people. I respect your Red Cross Society's humanitarian effort.
All right, on the topic of massive wildfires burning in West Coast British Columbia, Victor wrote with some suggestions.
Why do forests burn? 3 factors. First is warming. River water to cool the outskirts of forests. Second, hot winds. 3 perimeter fences are installed along the perimeter of the forest tracts, and they do not let hot air into the forests. Third, forest litter dries to become combustible. Chilled water is brought to the upper points of the forest, going down, irrigates the litter, dried last year's grass, fallen leaves and needles, and dead branches of trees. With this technology, the forest does not catch fire.
All right. Well, except there is a bit of a problem there in that we have about 0.5 million kilometers of forest in Canada, and that is far bigger than the entire combined landmass of Germany, France, Spain, and Italy. So I'm not sure fence building is actually practical. And then pumping water from rivers and creeks would also involve thousands of kilometers of hoses, thousands of pumps. And we do have a lot of mountains and hills and other obstacles in the way, so I'm pretty sure that those ideas, although very helpful, probably wouldn't be useful.
Okay.
Now, with legalized use of cannabis on the way in October, another story about a national survey showing that a significant percentage of people are already driving shortly after using cannabis elicited this remark from Vico Repo.
Sad to see drugs are a way of life supported by law in Canada.
On a story about a Canadian monument to a controversial Ukrainian national hero ignites debate, James Vandenblink commented,
monuments honoring war criminals of any political stripe have no place in our country, Canada. This is not multiculturalism in any stretch of the imagination. I deeply resent taxpayers' money being used for this purpose.
And finally, we continue to get reaction to a story from a few weeks back about certain batches of the heart drug valsartan, which had been sourced in China, and the launching of a legal action. Tammy McDonald wrote,
I have been taking valsartan for several years, and in the past couple of years, I have been having problems with irregular heartbeats and heart attack symptoms. Please add my name to the lawsuit.
And
how do you like my new CBC voice? Pretty good, eh?
Oh, yes. Okay. Lauren Green would be proud.
Yes, thank you very much.
Now, of course, we can't add actually any names to the lawsuit. That's not us. We're not involved in that. But
oh, no, that's right. That was a quote. Yeah.
But people, in fact, should contact the legal firm mentioned in the update story on that class action request if they want to find out more about it. And that's all the time we have for our letters for today. And coming up, we're going to be looking about an old sport that is now becoming an Olympic sport.
Okay. Jump roping.
We're going to do that? Oh, okay. We're going to go right into the story. I was going to go for the pause, but the musical pause.
Oh, okay. Let's go for the musical pause.
Do you want to go for the what do you think? Musical pause or straight into the story?
Music pause. Let's take a short break.
All right. Tanya, who's controlling the technical part of the program, says no. So, all right, Terry, go ahead.
All right. There's no pause?
No, there's no pause.
Okay. Well, speaking of pause. Sorry. Okay, so think about this. Right. Way back when, I'm reading this book called Sapiens, right? So we're going way back thousands and thousands and thousands of years. But, when guys were coming in back to the cave and they'd been out in the hunt and this and that and back from the pampas, what did they have to do? They sat around the fire, big deal. That was important, the fire. But anyway, but then they had to entertain themselves, right?
They were cooking wildebeests.
That's right. And here's the thing, though. But they had to have a little entertainment, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, sport, it's always been with us. It's part of us. So you could roll up a bunch of weeds or something and make it into a ball, and I'm willing to bet that's how soccer started.
Could be.
I mean, I'm just saying.
Because they didn't have old Coca-Cola cans to kick around.
That's right.
So they had to kick something around.
Now,
right?
at the same time, the people, probably the women, judging from the way it's evolved, they couldn't play, so they weren't allowed to play soccer. But, no, I mean, thank God things are changing. But, okay, so what happens? They find a vine, right?
Yeah.
And what do? They spin the vine, and they jump over it.
Okay.
No, you think that's possible? I think so.
Well, yeah, sure. Anything's possible.
That would be the start. That would be the origins of jump roping.
Okay.
No, and pretty much the same time, I'm willing to bet. Okay.
Could be.
Okay, so now we get here to this current situation where we're in the 21st century.
Yeah.
And for all these years,
children have been skipping rope.
And it's really cool. I mean, you got to be in incredible shape to skip rope. But anyway, so what happens? The sport that started with soccer, this is just my theory now, jump roping, has not made it to the Olympics,
you got to hurry up because we're almost out of time.
Okay, so we're about to get it to the Olympics. There's federations all around the world and in Canada, and I spoke to Erin Gillespie, and she's the chair of Rope Skipping Canada.
All right.
And so for competitive rope skipping in Canada, we are members of the International Rope Skipping Federation, or FISAC, and we are also members of World of Jump Rope. And so those two organizations have historically been the governing bodies for rope skipping, but they will be merging in the coming years by 2020 into the International Jump Rope Union. And so for us in Canada, how competitive rope skipping works is each individual province hosts their own competitive events. So usually each province will host at least 2 to 3 events throughout the year. So they'll either host a master's competition, which is like an individual competition for individual athletes, and then they'll host a team competition. So that's in the individual athletes form teams and do team routines, and then each provincial body hosts their own provincial championships. From the provincial championships, qualifying athletes are then eligible to attend the national championships, which is hosted across the country. Depending what year it is, we go to different provinces.
But what does a competition look like?
So a competition, if we look at the individual or the masters competition, it depends on the age category. So we follow a long-term athlete development model, which kind of dictates and governs the competition structure at each age level. And so, for example, for U10, so anyone who's 10 and under, depending on their birthday, of course, they do 4 events in the individual competition. So they do 30-second speed, so that's the number of steps counted on your right foot you can do in 30 seconds. Then they do a 2-minute endurance event, so that's the number of steps you take on your right foot in 2 minutes. They do a timed double under event, so as many double unders as they can do in 1 minute, and then they do an individual freestyle routine. So it's similar to like gymnastics or skating, where they do a routine on the floor. There's judges marking different criteria. They're marking difficulty. They're marking the number of mistakes they make. They're marking their movement on the floor, their use of the music, that sort of thing.
Right. That's my interview with Aaron Gillespie.
Or part of it, anyway.
Well, most of it. I mean, not all of it. I mean, just most of the extracts.
Well, the interesting thing is that, as you say, this is now come to an Olympic sport level. So,
well, they're trying to get it, but you see, you got to get through the bureaucrats at the IOC, right?
Well, is there a date that they think this might happen?
2028 Los Angeles, which would be fitting, right?
2028. All right.
All right. They can practice in Venice.
We got to actually skip out of here because we're almost out of time. So, for Pierre and Tanya in the control room, and Terry and here in this room. Big wave to whatever camera's there. Is that this one? Okay, this one. That's all the time we have. Take care until next week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.